All right, guys, if you want to open up your map, going through this. Did everybody get a copy of the notes? All right, so the first thing I'm going to show you guys again is just how, and those of you that have your own graphing calculator, you don't have to do this, but I want you to have a graphing calculator to use outside of the class. I do realize you could borrow one of mine, but I don't have enough for everyone. So I want you to get used to using one on your MacBook for when you have to do stuff outside of class. So if you would go just to a web browser, and if you just Google MN for Minnesota, test prep calculator, and some of you may have bookmarked this already, which if you did, that's great. And then when that comes up, you're going to use the top one here, Minnesota standalone calculators. And then what you will do is go down to where it says grades 8 and 11. And then hit start twice. And then up here in the middle of that toolbar, you'll see a calculator icon. And when you use this, you always have to clear this screen. So the clear button is right underneath these arrow keys. It's like 2 above the division. So if you just hit that, okay? So we're going to use this today to graph some parabolas. And we're going to get to where like a lot of what we're doing is going to be on the graphing calculator. So if we look back at our notes, what's going to happen today is we're going to be graphing quadratic functions. Quadratic functions, and with you guys having your MacBooks open, today is not a day not to pay attention. This is something that's kind of tough and you'll need to know how to do this. So what we're going to be doing is graphing functions that have an x squared. What makes something quadratic is going to be that x squared, and it's going to be a parabola opening up or down, okay? When you look at a parabola, okay, this is the equation, like the general equation of a parabola. It's something in front of x squared plus b would be what's in front of x plus your constant. And if what is in front of x squared is positive, that tells us our parabola is going to open up. If what's in front of x squared is negative, that tells you that your parabola is going to move or open down. Another thing that we're going to be doing today is writing the axis of symmetry on our graphs. And the equation to find the axis of symmetry is you take negative b over 2a. And I'll be showing you what that is. And on your cheat sheet, kind of what we're doing today is going to be this top box. Okay, so that is on there, so you have that. Another thing that we're going to do today is we have to label what the y-intercept is. And that is where your graph crosses your y-axis. And if you were to look at a parabola, let's just say it was like y equals 2x squared minus 4x plus 3, okay? This, first I should tell you, A is what's in front of the x squared, so that's 2. B is what's in front of your x, and you always keep the sign with it. So like in this case, it's -4. C is your constant at the end, and you always keep the sign with it, so that's 3. When they ask you to find the vertex is going to be 0, comma, whatever your C is. So in this one, you know that it is going to cross through our y-axis at 0, 3. Another thing they're going to be asking us for today is the minimum value or the maximum value. Now, if your parabola opens up, it's going to have a minimum value. If your graph opens down, it's going to have a maximum value. So they never would have both. They would have one or the other. Okay, and I'll show you how to find those too. So again, if whatever is in front of your x squared is positive, it's going to open up. If it's negative, it's going to open down. The vertex of a parabola is this point right here. It's like the point that your parabola either opens up or opens down. And that is one thing we're going to label on our graphs when we do it. So I'll be showing you how to find that vertex. And another thing that we're going to do today is when we're going to find the axis of symmetry, and we're going to label that on our graph. The axis of symmetry is a vertical line that would cut the parabola in half, so that if I were to fold this over the axis of symmetry, I would fold it onto itself. And again, like this one would have a minimum, this one would have a maximum. Let's see down here. I think I talked about all of that. So let's go ahead and try one, okay? So first things first, let's try to find some of this, okay? So the first thing that you want to do today is find what is your A, what is your B, and what is your C. Okay, A is what's ever in front of x squared, including the sign. Nothing's there, you assume it's 1. Okay, for x, if there's an x term, it's just what's in front of there. Now, this is something that will happen today. If there is not an x term, then you'd put 0. And then for your constant, it's going to be what is the number at the end. Okay, so B is what's in front of your x, and that's 4. And C is the number like at the end, it's the constant. And you use the sign with all of these, so that would be -3. Now, this tells you your y-intercept. So right away, one of your answers would be 0, -3. And then what I would do is go down here, and I'd go to 0, -3, and I'd put that point there. And this one opens up because it's positive in front of the x squared. So you know that it's going to open this way. So I could write here, vertex is 0, -3. That's one thing that you're going to have to do. Okay. Then I have to find my axis of symmetry, and that's where I use this formula, okay? So there's a negative in the formula, so you'd go negative, B is 4, and on the bottom it's 2 times A, which is 2 times 1. So this is -4/2, which would be -2, okay? When you list your axis of symmetry, you list it as x equals whatever this is. Because it's a line, it's not just a point. So x is going to equal -2. Okay? And like I said, you're going to be totally lost in this chapter if you're not paying attention. So today is not a day not to pay attention. What this tells us is that we have a, and I put vertex here. This is actually a y-intercept, so ignore that, sorry. We don't have to label our y-intercept, sorry about that. Okay, but what this tells me is that if I go to x equals -2, okay, x equals -2, I am going to have a vertical line at x equals -2 right there. Okay. And now that we do have to label, and when I label axis of symmetry, I do AOS for axis of symmetry. And then you say x equals, and it's -2. So you can't just say axis of symmetry -2, it has to be x equals because it's this line, okay? Now what we are going to do, when I find that -2, that not only tells me the axis of symmetry, but it also tells me the x coordinate of my vertex, okay? So I had labeled this vertex, it was supposed to be the y-intercept. And when I do these, this is important too. Whatever you get for x here goes in the middle of your graph, the table. And then up above here, you're going to do the two numbers that are smaller than -2, which would be -3 and -4. And then you're in the other direction, you're going to do the next two numbers that are larger than -2, so -1 and 0. Okay. That stuff you kind of have to do on your own. Now is when we're going to use our graphing calculator. Okay. So we are going to go to our graphing calculator and we're going to plot this in. So if you guys would look at your calculator, we are going to go to our y equals. Now, are any of you in stats class right now? Are you doing any stat plots at all? You are. Okay. So what you guys will find sometimes is you'll go to type something in, and if you have a stat plot turned on, it'll give you an error message. So this is a good idea for everybody to do, but if you guys go to second y equals, this shows if you have any stat plots on. And if you just hit number 4, that is going to clear any of your stat plots, turn them all off, and you shouldn't have a mistake. Now, if you're using a calculator that you've never used for stats class, they shouldn't get turned on, but sometimes they will. And if you just do that step, it'll get it back working. So let's go to y equals, and if you have anything there, let's clear it. Okay, and then we're gonna just go ahead and enter this. So to do x squared, you're gonna hit your x key, which is to the right of the green key. And then your squared key is right here above the log key, okay? And then you're just gonna go plus 4. X again is to the right of the green alpha key. And then it's gonna be subtract 3. So -3, and there's our graph. One thing that kids mix up when they're first doing graphing calculators, if you're ever doing the negative key, that's this key down here to the left of the enter key. If you're doing a subtraction sign, that's when you do this. Sometimes you'll get it and it'll say like go to error, or like you have an error. That's a really common mistake. So that some kids use the subtraction and the negative key interchangeably. Now, I was showing you guys a week or two ago how to graph on here, and we talked about how if you do Zoom 6, that is going to set this up where your X values go from -10 to 10, and your Y values go from -10 to 10. So we get a good idea of what our graph is gonna look like, okay? But what we're also going to use this for is a table. And then what happens is that table that you guys have right here, you don't have to actually put the numbers in and figure it out. For using our graphing calculators anyway, we may as well just go ahead and do this. So let's go, I'm gonna go back to this, and I'm gonna show you how to do a table. Now, we're gonna go second table set. And when we did our table, is our smallest number -4? Is that correct? On the table? Okay. So we want our table to start at -4. We want it to count by ones. And as long as, I don't ever change these, okay? Then I have that set. Now I want to go and look at the table. How I do that is I hit second graph, and that gives me a table. Is anyone stuck? Are we good? Okay. All right. This tells me if I go to my table now, these are the values that I want to enter in that table that we have. So where it says -4, I want to put -3 down to, I think we went to what, 0? So we want to enter these in our table. So let's do that. So when I did this at -4, I got a -3. At -3, I got a -6. At -2, I got -7. -1, I got -6. 0 is -3. This middle point here, that is your vertex. So if they ask you what your vertex is, it's always that middle point. So now I can go and plot these points on my graph, okay? So I'm going to plot -2, -7. And I'm going to label that that's my vertex. So I say vertex -2, -7. You'll notice the X coordinate of your vertex and this number are always going to be the same. If they're not, you've done something wrong. Then if I plot -3, -6, and -4, -3, and then on the other side, I'm going to plot -1, -6, and we already had that 0, -3 plotted. Now, I'm only requiring you guys to have 5 points on these. So you're going to have to just kind of estimate as you extend this parabola. You know, we know it goes like this, but we're not quite sure how wide it is. So just kind of estimate once you get back past your points. And then again, on the other side, just try to do it similar to what you did over here. Okay. But when I look at it, I want to see the 5 points that you chose and graphed on it. And then you also need your vertex and your axis of symmetry. So for today, except for domain and range, that's what we're doing today. Tomorrow, I'll show you some extra steps we have to do, but that's what we're doing for today. Now, the domain, if you guys remember what domain is, it's what X values does your graph work for. On all of these parabolas, your domain is going to be all real numbers. So this parabola would just keep on going forever and ever. So here you would just do a capital R, or you can say all real numbers, okay? Your range, however, is never going to be all real numbers. What that is going to be is what Y's is your graph, it's called defined for. And if you go across, This is the smallest y that I have a point for. And then every y up from that will have a point. And this y, this point is -2, -7. So right here is -7. So my range works for all y's greater than or equal to -7. Greater than or equal to -7. So I'd say y is greater than or equal to -7. If your graph opened down, it would be y is less than or equal to whatever the point is. Okay? Questions on that? All right, so let's look at a couple that are a little bit different. So in this one here, again, our C, let's just start with A. A is going to be -5, B is going to be -10, C is 6. So our y-intercept is 0, 6. And if you want to, you can go right to your graph and go 0 up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we know that's a point on our graph. Now, when I go to find my axis of symmetry, notice that there's a minus in front. Then I have my B, which is -10. And on the bottom, I have 2 times a -5. Okay. When you have a minus like that, what happens? Becomes positive. So on top, we have 10. 2 times a -5 is -10. What would that reduce to? 10 divided by -10 would be -1. And what that means is the x coordinate of your vertex is going to be -1. And in our graph, our middle number here is -1, or a table, I should say. And then below that, I do -2 and -3. Above that, I do 0 and 1. Okay. When I go down here, I have to plot this axis of symmetry, which is x equals -1. So I'm going to go to my table. I'm going to go to x equals -1, and I'm going to draw my dash axis of symmetry. And then down here, I'm going to say AOS is x equals -1. AOS stands for axis of symmetry. Now, to get these points, we're going to go and we're going to plug this into our calculator, and then we're going to use our table. Okay, so let's go to our calculator. Let's go to y equals, and let's clear what we currently had. And let's type in this one. Now, remember, when you're doing -5, you have to use this negative. So we're going to go -5x squared. And then it's minus 10x, and then plus 6. And if you want to look at what your graph looks like, you can always go zoom 6 and kind of see what it's going to look like. Okay. What I am more interested for today is to get that table. And we already set up our table once. Once you have it counting by ones, you don't have to go and set it up every time. And so if I just go to my table, I would do second graph to get it. And notice for this problem, the smallest number I want is at -3. So I want to plot, or in my table, I want to put -9, 6, 11, 6, and -9. Okay, that's the numbers I'm looking for. So if I go back and write those in, this was 9, 6, 11, 6, and 9. And one thing that happens for parabolas is you can very quickly go off a graph because we're squaring numbers. Okay. So, what was that? Yes, you're right. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so let's plot those points. -3 is at -9. -2 is at +6. -1 is at 11, and that's gonna go off the graph just one square. So let's just, instead of changing our values, let's just kind of estimate where -111 would be up there. We already have the point for where it crosses the y-axis, the y-intercept. And then at 1, we're down to -9 again, okay? So this one opens down, which makes sense because it had a negative number in between or in front of the x squared. And we have to label our vertex all the time. This would be our vertex. This middle point here is our vertex. So I would label that on my graph as -111, okay? Then what I need to do is say what my domain and range are. Your domain all the time in this is going to be all real numbers. Your range, you're looking at your y values. And if you notice, this biggest y that we have is up at 11. And then it's for all y's less than or equal to 11. So what I would want to say here is my range is for all y's less than or equal to +11. Everybody get that? Adam, are you paying attention? Sure you are. Okay. Now we're going to do one that doesn't have an x or a constant. Okay, so you can see one like this. If I go to say, like, what is my A, what is my B, what is my C? A is what's in front of x squared, that's 4. B is what's in front of your x. And if you do not have an x term, what do you guys think would be in front of it? 0, yes. And then there's no C. So again, your C would be 0. So one thing we would know then is that our y-intercept would be at 0, 0. And this graph would go through the point 0, 0. Okay. Now, when I go to find my axis of symmetry, I'm going to go negative, B is 0, over 2 times A, which is 4. Okay. Do you guys know what 0 divided by anything is? 0. And we never have a -0, so this would end up just being 0, okay? So our axis of symmetry is going to be at x equals 0. So on your x-axis, you're going to have that axis of symmetry right on the y-axis. So your axis of symmetry is at x equals 0. Now again, this number 0 goes in the middle here. 1 below that would be -1, 2 below it would be -2, 1 above it is 1, 1 more above it is 2. And now I'm going to put that into my table on my calculator so that I get it. So all I have to do then is go to my graphing calculator, go to y equals, clear what we currently have there. And then we're going to set 4x squared. You want to look at the graph, you can always go zoom 6 and see it. And then if you want to get your table, you're going to go second graph, and we want our table. Let's start at -2 like that. So -216, -14, 0, 0, 1, 4, 2, 16. Okay, those are the ones that we want. So if we go back and put those in, so we have 16, we have 4, we have 0, we have 4, we have 16. This again, remember, is your vertex. Okay. Now, this graph is going to open up and I need to label that vertex. So I'm going to do that. And then here's something that we have to do. I require you to have 5 points on the graph if possible. And if you notice here, like if that number was 49 or something like that, I probably would say just plot 3 points instead, like these 3. But since 16 we can get to by counting by 2s, that's what I'm going to do on this one, just so I can get more points on my graph. So I'm going to count by 2s here. So this would be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 14, 16, 18, and 20. Now, I'm not using any points down here, so I'm not going to write that. And I'm not changing this, so I'm not going to change that. I'm just going to do that. So now I'm going to plot those points. So 0, 0 is 1. At -2, I am up to 16. -2, I'm up to positive 16. At -1, I'm up to 4. 0, 0 is a point. At 1, I'm up to 4, and at 2, I'm up to 16. So here is what our graph looks like. So because you're squaring numbers, parabolas very quickly can go off of a 10 by 10 graph. Then I just have to go down here and say what my domain is, and my domain is always going to be all reals. And then what do you guys think your range would be? Y is greater than or equal to 0. Very good. Y is greater than or equal to 0, because it starts at 0 and goes up. And so that would be our range. So we're going to do one more. This one, our A is -3. What do you think our B is in this one? 0, because there's no X. And C is 5. Okay. Then our y-intercept is going to be 0, 5, and we can go and plot that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then when I go to do my axis of symmetry, it's going to be -b. And if b is 0, what is your axis of symmetry always going to be? Do you get it? Would be 0 divided by something. So this would be 0. So if your b is 0, 0 divided by anything is 0. So our axis of symmetry is going to be at x equals 0. So I'm going to go back here and label that on my graph. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to, the other thing that 0 tells me is that's going to be the x coordinate of my vertex. And I put that here. And then I do a -1 and a -2 below it and a 1 and a 2 above it. And that's where I use my calculator. So I'm going to go to my calculator. I'm going to go to y equals. I'm going to clear it. And this one is -3 x squared. So remember, it's x and then this x squared piece. And then plus 5. You want to look at it, do zoom 6. And then what we're going to do is look at our table. So I can go second table. And the points I want are from -2 to +2. Okay, so if I go back, these points are going to be -7, 2, 5, 2, 7. This is my vertex. So at 0, 5, this is my vertex and it's opening down. So I'm going to label my vertex above it. I can tell it's opening down because of that negative in front of x squared. So on your graph, you always have to have the vertex and the axis of symmetry labeled. At -2, we're going to be down to -7. At -1, we're up to 2. At 0, we're up to 5. At 1, we're up to 2. And at 2, we're down to 7. Okay. Then the last thing I have to do is just my domain and range. So my domain is the all real numbers. What do you think my range is going to be? Y is and less than or equal to 5. So you have 4 of these problems to do today. There's 2 on the front and 2 on the back. One thing I just want to say, when it says X coordinate of your vertex, I kind of put it as an ordered pair. You can just, whatever this is, that's going to be the X coordinate of your vertex. So if you just put 0 there, that's fine. Okay. And I do have a key posted on Schoology as well as I put it up on the podium. Did you guys think it was hard? Thank you.